Hello, everyone. Welcome to Snap Take. Since Evolutionary is not out, this was going to be Evolutionary Week. I decided to do something different. If you guys like this, I'll make it a series. We can do this idea regularly. If you don't like it, it'll be a one time deal. No harm, no foul. This is a look at the Marvel Snap meta. We always tell players that one of the key things you can do is know the meta, know the cards, know what people are playing. Well, how does one do that? I decided to put together a resource, and the slideshow I'm using for this will be in the description to this video below. We're going to look through the Marvel Snap meta as it is right now. And if you want me to keep updating this, I'll keep updating this. We're going to focus largely on play rate. Cool. Before we get there, don't forget the giveaway. You want a season pass? Subscribe to this YouTube. Follow, like, and sub the tweet in the description. It'll be the second thing in the description right after the slideshow. Then reply to that tweet with a content creator you'd like to see join the Snap Judgments podcast. Once you've done that, you're entered to win one of 5 season passes and entered to win a grand prize of a season pass with every single Token Tuesday for the month of June. Cool? Next up, we have what decks will you see more than 5% of the time from 70 or 80 to 100? Now, I started with 5, and then I decided to try and get to about 70 to 75% of the meta. These 14 decks make up 70 to 75% of the meta. I decided to round to make it a little bit easier to see, and again, you will have access to these stats. On SnapFan, you can only sort from 80 to 100. So I have 80 to 100. On Untapped, I went and found all the 70 to 100 decks that are full collection and how often they're played. These are the decks you need to know for your climb to infinite. Doesn't matter if you're rank 40 and you're seeing a slightly different meta. Yes, but if you're rank 40 and you're seeing a slightly different meta, I strongly urge you to, while you need to know the decks, you need to get really clean at your play before you start worrying too much about your own decks, before you start worrying too much about what your opponent is playing. If you'd like some content on that, please hit me up in the comments to let me know. If you are hitting 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, and you're struggling to get over the hump, and look, if you're hitting 60, if you're hitting 70, you can hit 100. You need to know the meta. You need to know what you're playing against. Well, 75% of your games will be against these 12 decks. I'm going to go take you through them quickly, and then we're going to look at the most popular build for each one. First up, we have Galactus. Galactus is the most popular deck in the meta. It is 11% on Untapped and 10% on SnapFan. I think SnapFan is actually a little higher because it separates out Nimrod, turn 6 Galactus, whereas I don't believe Untapped does. So this is 1 in every 10 games you're running into Galactus. That means you need to learn the tells for Galactus. If you can beat Galactus, that's great. If you can't beat Galactus, it's not the worst thing in the world to retreat for 1 cube when you know that's what they're playing. I know it doesn't feel good, but just do it. The second most popular thing right now, I guess technically it's third. The second-ish most popular thing right now is Bounce. Kitty Pryde is a card everyone has. Kitty Pryde Bounce is being played all over the place, and it is gaining huge power. It is a tier 1 deck. If you have Kitty and you have Beast and you have Falcon, you can play this deck. So it's pool 3 friendly as heck. You should be looking at Bounce. It's a great place to go if you want to win games of Marvel Snap. Next up, we have Nebula Control. This is the deck like the Nebula decks that are running Professor X, Spider-Man, Lockdown, along with Guardians. There's 1,000 flavors of this. And both SnapFan and Untapped have them slightly separated into different categories. So this is a weird amalgamation number. So I consider it a little less than Bounce. You're not seeing the best versions of this more than Bounce, but you're still seeing this deck an awful lot. On Untapped, 9%. On SnapFan, 8%. Electro Ramp, Sandman is back, largely as a response to the bounce decks. So we've got Sandman decks being played 9% and 8.5%. Sandman decks are an extremely hard matchup for a lot of things, and I would bet you soon, if High Evolutionary doesn't solve the problem, we're going to start to see some more Patriot again. Stature Hawk. The Stature Darkhawk deck is 6% on Untapped and 13% on Snapfan. It's important to note, though, that Snapfan does not separate, see the little star there, does not separate Stature Hawk from Darkhawk non-Stature decks. So if you combine those two, you end up in the same spot. At lower, close enough to the same spot as you do when you add Stature Hawk with regular Stature. With regular Darkhawk decks. So Stature Hawk is still very played. It's still one of the stronger decks in the meta, but its win rate has, with the advent of Bounce, with Galactus becoming more played, has plummeted like 6%. It's important to know if you're thinking that's the best deck in the game, right? Next up, we have Sera Surfer. Sera Surfer is 4% of the meta and 5% on Snapfan. More of you should be playing this. This is one of the easiest decks to play. Once you get good at it, you can play it at a good level right away. Once you get really good at it, it's one of the best decks to infinite with. So is Sera Control. We're going to take a look at Cam Best's list later. Cam Best, who was on the Snap Judges podcast last week, don't forget to check it out. We're going to take a look at his list. We took a look at Revis's list earlier in the week. All you got to do is look through this playlist. You'll find that. Look at the Revis version. These Sera Control Hitmonkey decks are really strong. Still very low played, only 3.5%. For some reason, despite no win rate, negative is booming again in the meta. I think we might be getting some extra hot location debris from when negative was so good for the peak day. But whatever. Negative is played 2% of the time. You should know how to recognize it and know that if you know how to Enchantress properly, you should still win. Also, Wave beats the crap out of negative. There's a few ways. Patriot Lad is only 2% of the time on Snapfan and on Untapped. I really, really expect Patriot Lad to start being played more as more people get Iron Lad. But I think there's still few enough people that have Iron Lad that I don't see it everywhere yet. But both Lambie, next week's podcast guest, I guess technically 2 weeks podcast guest, and Cam Best, our last podcast guest, have amazing versions of this that are worth playing. Destroy is played a lot on Untapped, but not really a lot on Snapfan. The Venom change, right? And Doomwave is played a lot on Snapfan, but not a lot on Untapped. However, and this is really important to note, Marvel Snap Zone is one of the taste makers of the meta. When they promote a deck, it gets played a lot. And this is largely Den's production, right? Den makes that tier list. That tier list has come under heavy criticism, largely from Specimen, another large Marvel Snap creator. However, that doesn't change its influence. It just honestly puts more eyeballs on the list. They have Doomwave, the deck I told you about 4 days ago that I told you everyone would be talking about, right? It was my video last Thursday, and I told you everyone will be talking about this deck in a few days. Well, Marvel Snap Zone released it today, Tuesday as of recording, as an A-tier deck. So it'll be everywhere in a couple days. This deck's playlist will shoot up the list. All good? Right. Let's look at the most popular version of each deck. First, we have Galactus. Your Galactus tells are fundamentally Yondu and Wolverine. There are destroy decks that play both. So what you're doing at that point is you're looking for a ramp. You're trying to protect against a ramp. This Galactus list is totally fine. This is not the best Galactus list. If you want the best Galactus list, check Monday's video, where I found a Galactus list with a crazy high win rate. However, these are the cards you're looking at. This is what you should expect if you're seeing a regular Galactus. The Galactus counters are numerous. Things like Debris, things like Polaris, Do the Job, Juggernaut, Cosmo, so on. Some of those need priority, some don't. Priority is almost never really hard to grab against Galactus. One of your biggest problems, however, is a Darkhawk that ruins your day. If it does, run. Unless they are a very high-level Galactus player, they have probably snapped wrong and you can escape with 1 or 2 cubes. Don't stress it. It's just part of the game. But this is Galactus and the most popular Galactus deck. 15,000 games. That's absurd. Next up, we have Bounce. This is the most popular Bounce deck. I believe this is Dexter's version of the deck. I think Shayad has a slightly better version. The main difference for Shayad's version is that it cuts America for Moon Girl, and it turns out that makes an absolutely humongous difference in the win rate of the deck. But basically, your goal is to kitty as much as possible with this deck. Your answers to this deck are largely Killmonger and Shadow King. This deck can also struggle with lane and location control because it needs a lot of space to play cards. Uh, last counter is obviously Wave. Wave destroys this deck if they don't see it coming. If they do see it coming, though, they can very often go off on turn 5 and then just play a large kitty on 6. Very strong deck. It is another A tier deck that you're going to see everywhere. You'll also note that if you bought Hitmonkey, everything else is a pool 3 or lower card. This is the Nebula Control. This is Dara's list. Our friend Savage Yeti hit Infinite with it. I believe another one of our friends, Mr. Fixit, hit Infinite with the same list. This is one of the strongest decks. It's super cool. I'm really excited that Guardians is meta. It does what it looks like. It locks locations. It uses Daredevil for information. It makes its cards bigger than yours, and then says you can't get to where I want to go. The thing to look out for when you're playing against this on turn 6, besides Magneto, which can move a lot of your board around, is a Gamora and Rocket play. Gamora is a 12 if they read the location right, and Rocket is a 4. 16 power in one lane is an awful lot. If you can't beat that, okay, time to go. A lot of the early game is basically making sure you either win the Storm lane or make sure that their Professor X Spider-Man lane is not something that they have a place to do cleanly. Jeff is fundamental to this deck. You can always replace Jeff with something else, but the best replacement for Jeff might absurdly be something like Cloak. That's not ideal, right? Excuse me, Claw. Wrong K sound. It might actually be Claw. That gives you the power you want in that Spider-Man Professor X lane, and it's a big surprise. You can always put Lizard in, you can always put Nightcrawler in, but they're significantly worse. I think you kind of need Jeff for this. This is the standard Electro Ramp right now. This is slightly different than I would have built it because I did not know there was an 11,000 game Electro Ramp playing Black Widow. The Zola Panther are very cool. I don't love the Widow. I get it because a Widow, if you're gonna wave, like you can 5 Widow and wave, and then like, sorry, no, I guess it would have to be earlier, but you can earlier Widow and wave, and then they have to waste their 1 card if they want to draw on playing that zero cost thing. It's also not the worst thing after Sandman. Makes your Devil Dino stronger, etc. I don't like that play very much. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't think it's totally worth it. It's really, really fun against Galactus when they Electro, though. It's got a nice little Panther Zola package to get some power. You can Panther Zola Odin, you can Doom Odin, you can Leader Odin, etc. It's a cool deck. It's a strong deck. It's hard to beat. What beats it is Patriot. Patriot destroys Sandman. You can also go over the top. A lot of the Doom wavy decks now that can do that because you're playing a 5/3 on 4 ideally, and they're just perfectly happy to say, okay, I'll just play 1 card to turn for the next couple too, and then you're sort of gambling. But it's a very strong deck. I believe our friend Fathor Newman hit Infinite with a version of this yesterday. Congrats, Fathor. This is the standard Stature Hawk. We've talked about this deck 1,000 times on this channel. It's one of my favorite decks. Our boy Safety made the original version that ran Nightcrawler before Nebula was out in that spot. There's also a variant that cuts a couple of the cards and runs Iron Lad and Doom. Also an excellent deck. It wins a lot, but you can see right here, this was a 61% win rate with like a 0.45 cube rate in the last meta, and that is simply no longer the case. This deck has come down a lot. It's still great. It's still something to be prepared for. It still does a really, really great job of being hard to go over and hard to go around because it can go wide and reasonably tall with cheap things. The deck does not like being waved on 5 at all. This version, anyway. The Doom version hates it less. The deck also really struggles with bounce unless you get Korg and an early Rock Slide to screw up their draws. Bounce can be a huge problem because, I mean, Nebula's bad, so I run Ghost in that spot against bounce. But it's a strong deck that has some weaknesses to the top things. Also, just kind of loses heart to Galactus, which is everywhere. Next up, we have discard. This is your standard discard list. I believe this is the old KM Best version. I believe it was him who started to say, I'm running only. Oh, no, this is not the KM Best version because it's running Hellcow. I don't actually know whose version this is. Sorry. So, this is running Hellcow. There was a KM Best version earlier which ran only Colleen, Sif, and Modok, so that all discard was targeted except Modok, which is, I mean, sort of targeted. It's just everything, right? This is a slightly different version. This is very highly played, good win rate. Weak cube rate, though, because again, it's really easy to retreat against discard. That's always been my complaint against it. But this deck is still very strong and still one to be aware of. It's especially worth being aware of Storm. Storm is very hard to beat with Dracula, Morbius, and Nebula in the deck. And fundamentally, you just need to do some math. Like, you need to not be lazy playing this and do some math so you know whether to stick or retreat. Darkhawk non-stature. This is your standard hand size deck. This is your Devil Dino deck. There's versions of this that run Ronin and Master Mold instead of Devil Dino's package. Other than that, it's the exact same concept. This one has She-Hulk. I actually really like She-Hulk in this deck because of the Moon Girl. It's got a lot of different ways to win. This deck will always win a fair amount. It's got Cosmo to protect you from Enchantress, but like Enchantress still does a reasonably good job of ruining your day. You just have to go bigger in one other location Enchantress won, and you're pretty good. It's a good deck, but not a busted one. Still very popular though, because outside of Darkhawk, it is extremely pull 3 friendly. And I guess Zabu. I'm so used to everyone having bought the season pass cards. Guys, if you're not buying the season pass cards, even if you don't love this video so far, subscribe and do the whole giveaway thing. Season pass cards change your experience with the game. If you can't afford it, they're so important. Reach out, participate. I'll do extra giveaways if you guys are showing interest in it. Just because, like, I think that people, like, even free to play people, like, if we can help you get involved in season passes, it will make your experience with this game so much better. All right, Sera Surfer. This is a version that I don't exactly run. I actually have an extra one over, I believe, Polaris, but this is probably slightly better. I run Ghost because I'm sick of losing to Kitty, and not having priority for Shadow King Killmonger automatically wins that match. You have to, again, do math here, right? The math can be challenging, but you should know what the deck is going to do. If they get their Storm Juggernaut, you have to know if you can win that lane. Usually, not always, but usually you cannot. So that's one lane gone. Can you go bigger in the other two? Sit there and assume they have everything. Assume they have the full Brood package. Assume they have Maximus, right? If they drop Sera, assume they have Brood and Maximus and Surfer, and then do your math. And if you win, stay in, and if you don't, stay out. No one does the math. Everyone goes, well, they only have part of the package. Well, they probably don't have it. And then you win. This is an excellent, excellent version of the deck once you get used to it. So I really, really prefer one or two in this deck because I think it really smooths out the curve and helps your power. I also don't love Cosmo because when you stormed and juggernauted, now there's no place to play Cosmo. And sometimes you just have to play a 3, right? And if you want a Cosmo at that point, fundamentally you're basically telling them where you're going to Surfer, and that seems like it's a problem, especially with Brood taking up so many spots. This is the Sera Control. This is the KM Best version. It's really good. I don't know why its win rate is so low, to be completely honest. Because I feel like I can't lose. Oh, this is not the KM Best version because he doesn't run Scarlet Witch. I don't remember what Scarlet Witch should be, but it's definitely not supposed to be Scarlet Witch. I'll check later. I'll leave it in the comments. If you're curious about it, just ask in the comments and I'll get back to you. But fundamentally, what this deck does is it gets Angela and Bishop down, and then it plays Kitty into them until it plays Sera, right? Oh, Zabu. Scarlet Witch is supposed to be Zabu. So you can get a 2-cost Shang-Chi Enchantress. There we go. You just play the cards over and over again. You get a big Angela, you get a big Bishop, you get a big Kitty. And then on the last turn, you play Kitty, and then you play one of the Shang-Chi Enchantress cards. Or if you don't see that combo, you've got Sera, and then you've got, like, play a bunch of cards into a big hit monkey. There's lots of ways to get big power in this deck, and lots of ways to control the opponent. I swear it feels like I can't lose with this deck, although I do think Zabu is insanely important. It's also worth noting that one of the tech cards, whether Shang-Chi or Enchantress, up to you, is cut for America in the Revis version I was talking about earlier. You can find a video on that. And it cuts Scarlet Witch / Zabu to run Bast in that case. And that deck is also extremely good. And I remain unconvinced that America doesn't just straight up belong in these decks, because the consistency element of seeing Kitty early, seeing Sera by 5, is seeing Angela and Bishop on curve is just so important. Shuri is still in the meta. We've got new Shuri Kitty decks. They're obnoxious and hard to beat. Honestly, no one in Infinite is really playing this, and at least in my bracket, so I'm not sure how to play with and around this. But basically, the idea is you got your standard Shuri, right? Like, you can do the same Shuri everyone's doing and assume that they cut Shang-Chi, so you can just go over the top. You can do the Shuri pass She-Hulk Taskmaster, or you can do a whole Kitty game plan where you use Kitty to make something like Angela big. Then you can play, I don't know, Shuri into Kitty Pride on 5, then Kitty Pride into Taskmaster on 6. It's a very, very powerful play line. But hey, run Shang-Chi and Killmonger, and you got this, guys. Okay. Next up, we have Negative. Negative is bad. This Negative is cool in that it runs null stuff. If you're running Enchantress, please beat Negative. If you're not running Enchantress, you're going to have some trouble. This is a very cool Negative build, but please note its win rate and cube rate. Thanks. Patriot Lad, this is the Gambest version. The Lambie version, I believe, literally makes 2 changes. It runs Ultron instead of Onslaught, I want to say, and it runs Wave instead of Mystique. That's it. Oh no, sorry, it keeps Onslaught. It cuts Misty. So it basically says I can wave on 5 to stop all the Kitty nonsense. I can go over the top of the the Electro Sandman nonsense. I can debris for Galactus. I can answer everything, except I still struggle with Enchantress. So if you're not seeing a lot of Enchantress, this is arguably the best deck in the game. KM thinks it is if you're not seeing Enchantress, and TLSG agrees. So, like, perhaps it is, but if you are seeing a lot of Enchantress, this is going to have some struggles. I personally like this version better than the Lampy version. I just think it's significantly more fun to play. I also released a video last week where I had my own version that's running the Patriot list, and I think that version is extremely consistent and really hard to play against, but no one's really playing it because, again, the benefit of small content creators is you get these videos without the fuss, without everyone knowing about them, but this deck will shoot up. It's just Iron Lad keeping it down. Destroy is hardly played. This is actually the Jolly Rogers Destroy Surfer deck. It's Dexter made a video on it, and everything Dexter makes a video on gets played a ton. So this is the deck. You can see what it does. It's got multiple. Ooh, this is not the straight up version of not the straight up version of Jolly Roger. I guess Dexter made one big change. He added Maximus for Nimrod. Otherwise, same deck. Cool. You're playing Destroy cards, you're playing Surfer. You're saying if I can get my Venom big and win one lane, I can Surfer nonsense in another lane and win. It's a perfectly effective deck. It's relatively smooth. You'll again note the win rate and cube rate. This is not something you should be doing if you're trying to make Infinite. And when you see it, just know what you're looking at. Our last deck of the day is Doomwave. This is a crazy good deck. This is actually the pre-Doomwave, the pre-reboot Doomwave that people still decided to apparently play for 600 games for reasons, and then not succeed with because Wave doesn't synergize with She-Hulk anymore. You're going to have to check last week's video for the current Doomwave. It's an A-tier deck. Marvel Snap Zone has it an A-tier deck. In a week, everyone will know every card in that deck. This is probably your last chance to play it, to be ahead of the curve, to get some cubes for when people don't know what they're playing. So check that video out. It will be the third thing in the description after this slideshow, the contest, then that. So please check it out. Play it. Assuming that you're seeing a lot of bounce, you will win with it. All right, that's it. We're done with today's video. Be sure to check back again for another snap take, hopefully high evolutionary. And don't forget to hit that sub button. We greatly appreciate you. Have a beautiful day.